Hello and welcome to the Tank Slappers podcast, a very special edition of the Tank Slappers podcast because, of course, we're on video for the very first time, and joining me as ever is Oriol Puigdemont, my good podcasting buddy, all the way from Australia. And as you can see, we are joined by a very, very special guest. It is 13-time Grand Prix winner, Randy Mamola. Guys, welcome. We're about to go racing. It's an exciting week.
Good morning. It's very exciting this week. I can't wait. I can't wait till tomorrow, even, to be able to see what happens. First practice.
Yeah, I'm very excited as well from distance, but this time. But yeah, really looking forward to see the action on track.
Yeah, indeed. It's been a long, 3, 4, 5 years now, it seems, in lockdown. But we are going racing this weekend in Jerez. We've got the test on Wednesday. And it's a very important test, actually, because, there's been no bike time for most riders. And that, for Honda, I think, is maybe the most crucial aspect because, of course, they had quite a difficult pre-season with the new bike, with the new aero package in particular. And it wasn't until the final day in Qatar that they sort of turned it around. So, Yuri, I'll start with you. What, from Honda's point of view with with Alex Marquez, how do you see things panning out this weekend? Because it seems like they're coming into a bit of a difficult weekend.
Well, with Mark, you never know because the reference there, the benchmark, he's been the benchmark over the last decade almost. So I think that he's gonna be there. Don't forget that he's the one adapting really good to all different conditions. So I don't see him in a bad shape, especially because he had the surgery on his shoulder, but it seems that it was like years ago. So he had plenty of time to recover, and he's probably one of the fittest guys on the grid, actually.
Yeah, well, that's the interesting thing about the shoulder, because we thought at the original start to the season, Randy, that this was going to be a big problem for Mark. Honda disputed this, but he did look to struggle a little bit in testing. Now that situation's changed, we're coming into a calendar where all bar one circuit Marquez didn't win on last year. It all seems to have swung back in Mark's favour.
Listen, he's a tough guy, man, and he's proven that. He's shown that. The same surgery to the other shoulder the year before, came out swinging and had his best season, I think, by, as you say, winning on all the circuits that especially he looked at and knew that he had to improve. But the question mark's still going to be there. I mean, with the aero package and how you feel, who gets up to speed really quick, how much pressure there is against with the competition alongside of him, what that happens with Mark. He's always been able to answer to that and answer very well. Injury is of the utmost when you're still battling with it. I mean, man, the surgeries that kid's had, 4 or 5 hours every shoulder. That's a lot of work to be done. But as Oriol said, that he's so fitting strong now. You can see him. You see his face is chiseled out, and he's ready for this weekend.
Yeah, it's the garage next to him that I suppose everyone will be all eyes on. Alex Marquez making his long-awaited debut, but it's in sort of interesting circumstances because he's already been told by Honda that he's out of the factory team. He has a 2-year factory contract for next year with LCR, which we will talk about just in a minute because that relates to another rider in Cal Crutchlow. But where do you think Alex's head is going to be? Because, obviously Honda's given him this new contract, but they've sort of said to him, well, we don't think you're good enough for the factory team, even though you haven't raced yet. So it's not really the ideal situation for a rookie, is it?
Randy?
Well, going in, go ahead, Oriol.
No, you go.
Well, again, I mean, going into it, it's always been stated that if you're taking a rookie if you call a world champion from Moto2 a rookie, for the class, I guess, itself, going to a bigger bike. But, looking at that situation, Alex coming into the championship would have been nice if he'd already signed for a satellite team. I think as Alberto, one of the bosses of HRC now, of the factory team, has stated, it would have been nice to be able to place him in that position. obviously they've seen something in his preseason testing that they like. And who's the best teacher in that garage? His brother. They're going to get along no matter what. They live together, they train together, dirt track wise, and so on and so forth. So I don't foresee that. I think if you don't know the full story, if you're a fan and you don't read a lot and so on, that you can look at it exactly what you just said. He's got a 1-year contract, and now he just signed for a 2-year contract, but it's going to be with LCR. I just think the same thing, moving him out of the factory team to LCR. LCR is a great home for him, and the reason of that is they've had great experience. They've worked very close with the factory. They do a lot of test work with Cal Crutchlow in the last few years with Cal, getting a lot of podiums and few victories with Cal. So it's a great team to have that base. And so they've nailed it down where he's got 2 more years. He doesn't even have to think about that. Let's get him running this year, get him up to speed, and see what we can do with him.
So yeah, if I totally agree. And I just want to say 2 things. So I wrote a feature about that, about why Honda has decided to replace Carl with Alex. And don't forget that Alex supposed to be racing in Moto2 this year, and now he has a 3 years contract with Honda. So, and don't forget that last year when Honda made the announcement of Alex Marquez going into the MotoGP with the Repsol, they say, well, he will have to prove that he is fast enough to get another contract. And now, even before the first race, he has a 3 years deal with a factory support. So I think it's really good for him. He will have a lot going on this weekend. I mean, in terms of racing inside in the first race. But I think that in a way, maybe it has been a relief for him, this announcement. So I think it will be, he will have probably much less pressure than he supposed to have.
Yeah.
Yeah, sorry, exactly, because he already knows that the next 2 years he's covered, and so on. And what he just needs to work on is the fact that who's around him in the races, who's around him in qualifying. The guys that he's going to be seeing in and out, week in and week out, those are the guys he has to beat and work on and slowly step up. He's got talent. He's been around for a long time and won the World Championship and rode super well last year in 2019 in Moto2. So I'm looking forward to seeing where he comes out.
Moto2 is a hit. I mean, the competitiveness of Moto2 is crazy.
Yeah,
it's brutal. So I think that he has handled the pressure quite good.
Yeah, and I suppose it's worth mentioning as well that his pressure and throughout his career has been different to most other riders, given who he's related to and given the comparisons. And we saw that in his early Moto2 days. He really, really struggled. So to have that turnaround and to get a Honda seat is, it does show his class. We'll move on to Ducati because, again, it's another interesting situation there because, of course, as you've been writing about over the past few weeks, Yuri, talks between Ducati and Andrea Dovizioso have stalled again. And we're not really sure what's going to happen now. Dovizioso's injured himself with a shoulder in a motocross crash. It doesn't seem like it's a particularly happy atmosphere there at Ducati right now, which is not really what they need, given that, these early races are going to be crucial in what is effectively a sprint championship now, 13 rounds.
Yeah, I think there's definitely something going on there between Dovi and Ducati. I spoke with Ducati. It was, I think, 2 weeks ago, and they told me, okay, we're gonna give him some time to think about his future, about what he wants to do, about his situation. But okay, I mean, I wouldn't be relaxed if I'm Ducati and I have the possibility that Dovizioso decides to retire. So I don't see how many options Ducati has if he decides to stop racing.
What are your thoughts on the Ducati situation, Randy? Of course, Dovi's talked about a sabbatical, but I don't see that working for him particularly well. If we look at all the signings we've had this winter with all the young guys coming through, yeah, Dovi's a great rider, but 34 years old now, he'll be 35, I think, when we start the 2022 season. If he was to sit out 2021, it doesn't seem like that would be the best option for him.
I don't think so. I mean, the best option would have been a nice blanket of roses and everything hunky-dory going into this season. And unfortunately, as you just stated, his accident with the motocross, broken collarbone. Prior to that, all the media outlets, advertising the fact that their Ducati and him are not getting along, those type of things. None of that works really well on the mind. I'm very interested to see how he gets along this weekend. I'm friends with him. I don't speak with him. I say every once in a while, I send messages and so on just to say if you're okay and so on and so forth. But I'm anxious to see where he lies with this injury and how he can go. For the last 3 years, he's been runner-up in the championship, and he's had some fantastic races. Last year, again, I looked up some of the results. There in Jerez, he finished 4th last year, just off the podium, but only a couple of seconds back. And it was Mark was 1.5 seconds ahead of Vinales, or was it Rins? I'm not sure. Anyway.
I have the thing in front. It was Rins
second, and then obviously Vinales. So those are the things that are going to be interesting. But who's Ducati going to put on that? So there's an option, obviously, because we've seen that, and we'll get into that soon. I think as LCR's taken Alex Marquez for 2021 and 2022. Where does that leave Crutchlow? Mm-hmm. Could he move over to there? So it is a predicament to be in for Ducati. And Dovi, if he's not happy where he's going to be at, if he's not happy with the deal or whatever, and maybe he sits home.
So no, I just wanna add that, which is clear to me, is that Ducati really needs the best version of Dovi this year. Otherwise, they're gonna get in trouble. The bike, we had some question marks still regarding the precision testing. So let's see. Jerez has not been the best track for this bike, and we're gonna be there twice in 2 weeks.
That's going to be really good to see as well. As we saw that in Formula One just a couple of weeks ago, these last 2 weeks was back-to-backs. They're going to really show the sign of how things are and who can improve and so on. That's going to be super interesting for all of us.
Yeah, it's a very good point you make about the double race, because it seemed in pre-season testing that the new tires from Michelin really sort of didn't suit Ducati or the Hondas so well. The bikes that weren't inline fours, such as Yamaha and Suzuki. Dovi spoke about it a bit. I remember Sepang said we only need some time to get used to it. But with back-to-back races, with so many back-to-back races, there isn't really time to get, or as much time as they'd want to get used to it. So that could be a key thing in these early races.
Yes, definitely with the tire situation. One of the things that I've noticed across the board with Ducati is we get to a racetrack and a Ducati rider seems to go well. Could be Jack Miller, could be Bagnaia, who's shown a lot at times, and then Petrucci. And then, of course, obviously Dovizioso. But there's times when one goes backwards or one goes more forward. And it just shows you that there's an array of different rider abilities as well as styles when they go to attack these bikes. Miller seems to be a little bit more aggressive. Dovi's very smooth, very much like Jorge Lorenzo was with the bike. Bagnaia is kind of in between there as well. So it's kind of unique with that. But they've all got to feed off each other for sure to try to make this thing work.
Mm-hmm. I think the interesting one for me at Ducati this year is Jack Miller. Of course, he's got the factory team contract for next year, but this year does need to be a big year for him. He needs to step up in a big way because he was solid last year, but maybe not as good as he should have been on a full factory machinery. So I think this year he probably needs to take that step forward, particularly if Ducati are looking at potentially losing its number one rider in Dovizioso next year.
Who did you just say? Was it Miller?
Miller, yeah.
Yeah. No, I think Jack. One of the things that Jack's had on his side is the fact that he lived in Australia for the last 6 months, and he was the one getting to train when a lot of guys weren't able to train. So hopefully he can put that to good use. I think he's been much more creditable this last year. I think he got 5 podiums, in the thing, and he was in the thick of it. And he's a great character to have. So yeah, him stepping up to that will give him that much more motivation. Ducati takes care of their satellite teams very, very well with the engineer, with Deligny going into those garages, which is very important. And I think that helps a lot as well.
Mm-hmm. We'll move on to Yamaha Suzuki because as we were talking just before we started recording, Rins and Vinales look to be the strongest riders coming into this season, next to Marc, obviously, because Marc is Marc. He could be riding with 2 arms behind his back and he'll still be up at the front. But pre-season testing was really, really strong for Vinales on the new Yamaha. The new Suzuki's taken a step forward. In these early races, these are circuits that suit those bikes. Jerez is a good circuit for Yamaha Suzuki, as we saw last year. Brno's quite a good circuit. It seems like this could be a really good opportunity for Yamaha and Suzuki in these early races in particular.
Yeah, 100%. I think let's say that in Qatar, Suzuki was probably, I would say, one of the most balanced and competitive bikes, or the best, or the most competitive. And both riders, even Joan Mir was really fast. Both riders have said that the bike performs really well. That it is an evolution from last year's bike. It's not new from scratch. So, and they are really, really happy with the performance. They have more power now, more top speed, which last year they were struggling with that. And the handling of the bike is really good. So I think Rins is even more mature than last year. Mm-hmm. So I think that this year he will be a bit more consistent, because last year he was really fast. He won the races, but he had some downs. So I think that he can be a title contender. Okay, it's too soon, but I think that if he can perform and he can be solid enough with this sprint championship, I think Suzuki has good chances.
Yeah. The thing for me with Rins is that those 2 wins in particular came in really aggressive circumstances, holding off Valentino at the Circuit of the Americas and fighting against Marc all the way to the end at Silverstone. That to me is sort of set Rins apart from the others, I think, a little bit, because he's shown that he can go toe to toe with Marc and win. Whereas Vinales last year did that at Australia and it didn't quite work. So I would say maybe coming into this race, Rins maybe has a little bit of the advantage in terms of the fight to Marc. Randy, would you agree with that?
I think so. I think mentally they just have to believe. They have to believe in their package. They have to believe in their team and so on. And I think Mir has helped setting an example in that garage, that the bike's working even for another style of rider, another mental attitude towards the championship. And that will help. Feeding with Vinales, they all know where the Yamaha's at. And it's always been kind of strange that the Yamaha and the Suzuki's always seem to handle and or thereabouts. But the Suzuki seem to have just that handling, and Rins seems to have that style that doesn't look like he's riding very fast, but he certainly is. And it all goes down to, what is that complete package going to be of that HRC with Marquez's 93 on it, because that's the guy that they've got to beat in and day out to win the championship, not just 1 or 2 races.
Yeah, I mean, the consistency is key in this one, because Marc last year, 18 of the 19 races, he was first or second, and arguably the sprint championship suits him more, because we see that in practice. You can just go out and bang in the lap straight away, bang in the race pace straight away. This very much is a thing that they will need to get on top of quickly.
With Suzuki maybe getting more consistency out of their bike, that will help Rins, who had terrible starts, meaning I think he was qualifying 12th, 13th, things like this, 3rd, 4th row. and then coming through to finish in the top 5 and or even closer towards the front. So that can't happen anymore. These guys have got to be towards the front right from the beginning, unless they have that much more of an issue that they can fix going into the race after qualifying. But it's going to be an exciting year with them.
The other Yamaha that everyone's interested in, Fabio Quartararo and the Petronas Sepang Racing Team bike. Last year, of course, was the breakout rookie sensation. There was a couple of points as well where he really rattled Marquez. Sepang qualifying in particular, when we had that sort of mind games of Mark following Fabio, and that led to Mark's crash. It seems, there's a lot of excitement around Quartararo, and there's not really any pressure on him to win a championship this year. He hasn't put any pressure on himself to win races before stepping up to the factory team, as he told Yuri a few weeks ago. So from that point of view, Quartararo to me seems perhaps maybe the most deadliest of Marquez's rivals, because he's just got no pressure, really. Given that he's only in his second year and the factory contract secured, he can just go out there and improve and see what's what.
Randy.
Okay, so my question mark to that is, yes, I understand all that and so on, but I still think that there's a bit of pressure. Why? Because he now has a factory bike. He is now a factory Yamaha rider. One of those question marks that maybe Oriol can answer is the fact that at the tests, when he got to ride the factory bike, like Vinales' Mavericks and Valentino's, it seemed that he struggled a bit. Not struggling is probably the wrong word, because everyone's going to take it back to the bank. And just found it to be a bit foreign to him. Mm-hmm. And then when he went back to his old bike, he seemed to be able to click right off the lap times. So that for me is going to be a question mark. Don't forget, these riders have like a memory foam. And, he remembers everything he's done on last year's bike, which was just super. Going out there and racing with the top guys, beating the factory guys with his Yamaha, the factory Yamaha team as well. But when it comes down to this first race, they've got to get that memory foam back together, and he's got to start to understand that bike like no other, because errors are made by you feeling something that you thought you had, but you don't really have. And then accidents start to happen. You start to lose the front. I don't know why. These type of things. I'm not putting a curse on him or whatsoever. I think that Yamaha's working very, very close with them. One of the big differences, I think, with the Petronas team starting last year versus when it was with Tech 3 is that, you got Ramon Furcado in there, Wilco Zeelenberg in there, a lot of top brass people that have worked with Jorge Lorenzo, worked with the factory team, worked with Vinales. And so they can get those guys really, really going. And I think even Franco Morbidelli this winter showed some stronger signs of being much stronger, because that team is getting to be there.
So, I totally agree. I think I remember I asked Fabio when I did the interview a few weeks ago, and I asked him about the pressure, because to me, and I would like you to answer this question as well, Randy, I think that we, the journalists, always speak about pressure and we don't even know what it means, because we've never been there, we've never been in a grid, we've never been with so many exposed to that adrenaline, to that pressure. So and sometimes I remember being shocked by Jorge Lorenzo answer to this same question. He always said, "Listen, the pressure was when I was a kid, and or I was winning, or I was out of the game." So I think Fabio this year will start to feel the pressure, because he has signed already for the factory team next year. So he, in a way, I think that he's obligated to show something, and something more than last year. So
we expect it. We expect him to be better. We expect that to happen. The fans himself would be thinking, well, he's got a factory bike now, he should be out there and being able to beat Mark. But those combinations change week in and week out. Sometimes these riders arrive at a circuit and one rider just goes from 4th or 5th from the last week to being a top contender right away. And that's how close that is. So he's got to get that feeling right away. He's super exciting to watch, super fun. One of the things that we always had, when you talk about pressure, that pressure is also an adrenaline, exactly what you said. It's an adrenaline you feed on to be that much more precise, that much more on top of things. And I think this year in particular, it's going to be so important because it can be a shorter season that we know with what's going on in the world. And so therefore, errors are going to have to take the back seat. When things are not right, you're going to have to take as much points as you can without taking too much risk until you get towards the end of the season if you're really going for that championship.
Yeah, I think that's a very good point. You mentioned Franco there. I want to touch on Franco just a second because, of course, he has got a new contract in his back pocket. 2 years, which is actually quite surprising. Thought for a satellite team, they generally operate a lot of the times on 1-year deals. So that shows a lot of the belief that Yamaha has in Franco and SRT. And like you said, in the winter, he took a step forward. Last year, he spoke a bit about not sort of quite working as well with Forcada in terms of setup, but then he started to get it later in the season. So now that he's sort of learned those lessons, this should be a good year for him.
For me, I think so. I mean, coming from the Honda, he rode a Honda, correct? In 2018, yeah. Coming from the Honda and then going to the Yamaha, it being a new team and so on and so forth, and then being alongside Quartararo, a rookie, who didn't have a season under his belt in MotoGP. It was a very difficult situation to be in, but he did double his points compared to the season before. We saw him battling towards the front in a lot of positions. I think that being a VR46 rider kind of probably helped that situation. But Franco in particular is a great kid. I mean, he's a great person. He's 25 years old. So when somebody looks down the road and says, well, why'd they sign him for 2 years? He's going to be 27 at the end of his contract. They're still very, very young and a lot to learn. He has good control of the bike and riding and doing the things that they do at Rossi's ranch and in that competitive field the whole time is something that it could easily grow on him to excel this year. I think that he will. Will he be able to beat Fabio? It's yet to be seen. We'll see.
I think that spoken with a few of his team members, they told me that this winter, which has been really long, he's been focused a lot on training and on nutrition. So he's improving. He has improved quite a lot. The consistency and how do you call that when you have your being able to perform at the limit for match time.
Yeah, stamina. Your stamina to last the whole race.
Yeah. So I think Yamaha has a lot of confidence on him this year because they know that Franco has a really strong and balanced mind. So they are really looking forward to see if he can show all what he's been working on.
That's a really good point. Of course, we're expecting an announcement pretty soon that next year Franco will be paired with his mentor Valentino Rossi at SRT. Testing wasn't brilliant for Rossi, I think is fair to say. He struggled a bit with the new bike. He was still struggling with tyre wear over long distances. And it was quite in contrast to the comments Vinales made about the bike where, Vinales was ready to take on the world at the end of the Qatar test. Where do we see, first of all, where do we see Rossi this year? And it's one thing for him to continue his career out of enjoyment, but, last year the results, only 2 podiums. The last 10 races, he was only 4th or 8th. It doesn't seem to me like he's made that step forward this year based on what we saw in testing. Is that a fair assumption, Randy?
Oh, definitely. And Valentino would be the first one that stood up and said, I'm not quick enough. And, he said that in the past. And so we've got to see again, because this was the season that was supposed to start back in March, April, that we were going to see the first few races, whether or not he was going to continue and so on. But, you know, finishing in the top 5 in this championship, 5, 6, 7, is a tough job at the moment. The competitiveness across the board with the youth that's in this championship, with the machinery that's in this championship, I think at 41 years old, he's doing a fantastic job. We'd all like to see that continue. And hopefully he gets to this next race. And when you watch the video content and everything that they do at the dirt track, dude, he's got a great style. He's still, you know, motocross. He's still jumping, you know, buildings and things like that. He's so, you know, he's a very, very talented person. But these young guys take the risk, you know, and I think one of those risks are in preseason testing. They go out and they push harder, and maybe Valentino doesn't. He has it's more logical thinking process, because he is going to be a bit more fragile going if he falls off, definitely. But he can't think about those things. I'm hoping the best for him, you know, this year, because especially in the first couple of races, and again, we can see it back to back. But he's, again, one of the most honest persons by saying, hey, I'm holding my hand up. And I think also the Petronas team would love to have him there. Maybe it's the opposite effect. Valley needs to move away from the factory team, which he has. And, you know, we've given the Quartararo bike, you know, Valentino's bike to Quartararo in a sense, for 2021 and 2022. So we've got a free year to let Valentino blossom, if you can say that, because he's a flower the whole friggin' time, and see where he gets at. So I think that there's still podiums involved in there. Whether or not there's a victory left in him will depend on the situation. But again, you can never count that guy out on the last lap passes. Never.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. I mean, we've seen Vale coming back from the dark side many times. So yeah, it's incredible what this guy can do on a racing bike. So I would be really happy to see him winning again.
Mm-hmm.
I don't see if under the current circumstances this is possible. I'm definitely believe that the podium is the target for him, despite maybe not the P1. Mm-hmm. But yeah, I think that considering the level of this year's grid, I think that would be perfect for him. If he is able to stay there, mm-hmm. to be in front. I don't mean being only able of winning races, just being there. I mean, fighting for the podium, fighting for finishing P5. I think that he's gonna keep going because, I mean, he enjoys racing. And why? I mean, the only question that he has to do to himself is, okay, is, let's say, P5, P3, P4 good enough for me to stay? If he says yeah, and it's only his answer. I mean, he's the one who has to answer this question. Mm-hmm. I mean, not us, because it wouldn't be fair.
Yeah.
If we have to ask this question, if he's happy by finishing P4, P5, okay, there's still 15 riders behind him.
Exactly.
So what's the point of retiring him? So I think it's up to him.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think also the same thing. You'd be the team owners would be going down the list. What riders are going to be able to beat him? Don't forget, in Texas, he battled it right down to the last lap. Put Reens right to the last moment. And here we are talking about Reens battling for the championship. You know, this was just last year. Valentino, at 40 years old, was pushing Reens to for a victory. And that victory can easily happen this year. Again, under certain circumstances, I think in this championship, I think he's going to be trying to look at the data as much as he can, even from Vinales and Quartararo, because I know that they did, because Quartararo was sensational last year, beating the factory bikes straight away. And of course, right across the board, they're able to see the data. You know, he's willing to learn and do anything that he can do. And man, I'd take a top 5 guy if you were going to put somebody else that was not going to be in the points and or battling for 15.
For sure. I think for me, you mentioned there, Yuri, about, ultimately it's Vali's decision and he still enjoys racing. I think that's maybe the most infectious thing about Valentino is that passion for racing, because, you get a lot of, in all of sport, they get to that age, they kind of get close to the end of their careers and it's sort of, they love the sport, but the enjoyment's not there anymore. It seems the complete opposite for Valentino, that he just loves it, every aspect of it. And maybe even more so than he did, 10 years ago.
I think let me say that there are no many riders or former riders that enjoy the whole racing as, for example, Randy does. I mean, we've seen him almost for more than 20 years being involved into this championship, and in a way I see Valentino the same way. I mean, it's just his life. So I don't see why Randy has to say, okay, goodbye, it's time for me to go. No. I mean, if he's enjoying, it's his life. So keep enjoying it.
I love this sport just like Valley does. I've been a part of this championship. This is my 42nd year. I'm 60 years old. It's intriguing to me, all the engineers and ingenuity that goes on and so on and so forth. But getting back to Valentino, it just seems like it's that encore, that encore when you go to a concert and everybody steps back and you're off the stage. And when they come back out, that euphoria, he gets that euphoria. He gets that energy and he loves it. I have chicken skin at the moment when I say that, because it's the absolute truth. He thrives on that energy. He loves the fans. He loves what he does. And it's fantastic to see. Fantastic for all of us.
He's very much sort of like the old rock bands that, they might be 40 years into their career, but they can still rock just as hard as anyone out now.
I was going to say the Stones, but I thought that might have been a little bit too old. But he'd still be loving it. He'd still be loving that. And that's going to be hard. And I can see him thriving on the fact of, come on, give me a wild card if he did retire. Give me a wild card for Mugello, something, so.
Yeah. I hope Valentino does make that step forward this year, because it wasn't, obviously we're completely unbiased, we don't have any favorites, but it wasn't fun to watch Valentino finish 8th, for all those races in a row in the second part of last year. It's not where he should be. So I hope we do see that step forward, because with the championship, I think it does need that Rossi factor. It's such a boost for interest in MotoGP when Rossi gets on the podium. So if we can have a few more of that, then I think it would be fantastic. We'll move on to KTM quickly in Aprilia. Well, KTM's winter has been interesting because, of course, they've lost Paul Espargaro for 2021, which is a big deal. But the bike took a big step forward in testing. Paul looked like he, if the wind blows the right way, could maybe scrape a podium this year in normal conditions. So what do you think the atmosphere is like at KTM, Yuri? Because it sounds like it's not really the most comfortable atmosphere over the past sort of few months with everything that's gone on.
Well, I understand your point, but I don't think that KTM can allow this to happen, because they need to push and get better and better under the current restrictions that everybody has. But they need to push and they need to be more competitive. And don't forget that, let's see how the Aprilia performs. But the Aprilia made a huge step forward, at least from the speed point of view and from the pace. Let's see the reliability. But I think that KTM needs Paul, and Paul as well, considering that he has signed with Honda, needs to prove that he's good enough. I think it will be good for him just to show and to demonstrate that he's fast enough to go to the HRC. So I think it's the best thing for him to do his best, which I'm 100% sure that he will. And same with the bike. I mean, they need Paul, because he is the number one rider, the one who rides the RC16 at its maximum. So both parts need from the other.
What are your thoughts, Randy, on KTM with Paul, and of course they've got Brad on the bike as well, and Miguel at Tech 3. It's a good sort of team, but there's a lot of pressure on them, it seems, this year with the bike taking that step forward.
Well, that bike's taking a step forward. They've got to utilize Paul as much as they can this year to continue that push with Binder alongside of him, and try to get this bike better and better. Obviously, with Pedrosa coming back into the fold, being physically fit is probably one of the most important men on those teams. Why? Because they have belief. The riders have belief. The people inside the team, the engineers, have belief in what Danny has brought to the team. And you saw how quickly the bike changed. And even Danny was bloody fast in preseason testing, sometimes fastest in that. Just because it's fastest doesn't mean that it's easy to do. That's the thing. The MotoGP bike, to get it to that level is one thing, but to be able to hang it out day in and day out, lap after lap, that's the hard thing. And what I hope with Paul is that he doesn't get too uptight about, I got to prove that I'm an HRC rider. I got to prove. No, he's got to run that bike and ride it the way that it needs to be ridden without overriding it too much to the point where he gets injured and things like this, which goes the exact opposite way. He needs to work really close again with Danny and do those things to make this season a good finish for him with KTM, knowing that he's going to HRC, and that HRC can continue to branch out and saying, thank you very much, Paul. It's been nice having you, but we've got some good riders coming in for our championship for 2021 and 2022.
I think one of the riders a lot of people are interested in, myself in particular, Brad Binder, of course, great in Moto2. But it's a really difficult rookie season for him because he's not really going to get a full rookie season. He's only going to get 13 races. So, and a lot of tracks he's not going to get to see until next year. So it's almost going to be like a rookie season in two stages for him. But, how do you see Brad getting on in that factory surrounding? Obviously, big pressure there to be a factory rider straight away in your, rookie career.
When you look at the first couple of seasons with KTM versus with some of the rookies that were entering on the bike, they definitely had a lot worse than what it is now, because the bike is definitely performing in a much better way, much more rideable. And Brad Binder, you've seen, has had tough seasons in the championship in Moto2, going up and down with the chassis of KTM when they decided to run a certain chassis and their own thing, and versus a Kalex or whatever, which is a tough championship. So we know the toughness of Binder, and we know the level of what he is. I saw some sunshine here and there in the tests periodically. Physically, he needs to step up, because those bikes are going to be so physical, and how hard Paul rides that thing and the riders that are above him. But again, having Danny Pedrosa in that garage is imperative, I believe, because Danny is a really good guy. Brad Binder is also a very good kid, great rider. And in amongst that, with a group of engineers and top brass that are in KTM's garage, there's a good possibility for him. And that's got to carry on. That's got to carry on, because Miguel Oliveira is going to be the factory rider next year alongside of Brad Binder. So, that's what it's going to be. They've got to believe on those guys and rely on the test rider.
Yeah, definitely. And just finally, we'll touch on Aprilia, because as Yuri mentioned just a few minutes ago, big step forward with the RSGP. Aleix was really, really strong in testing. When, the bike, there was a bit of reliability, but on race runs, I remember one of Maverick's debriefs, he was really enthused about the Aprilia. He was talking to some of the journalists, and he's really excited by the bike. So it does seem like Aprilia have really arrived at the party now, and they've got a great rider in Aleix. We don't know what's going to happen with Andrea Iannone, but that's not really important to what happens this season. Yuri, how do you see Aprilia going this year?
Well, I've always been a bit. I have to say that I've always been a bit skeptical about them.
Yeah, there's been some interesting comments you've made on some of our podcasts before about Aprilia.
No, but it's just because most of the riders, let's say few of the riders, they always say, wow, on precision testing, wow, the new bike is amazing.
Yeah.
Wow, the new bike is, well, this is a real step from last year's bike. Wow, this one, yeah, and I'm there standing in front of them, and I say, okay, so we're gonna see you fighting for, let's say, with the top guys or what? And then the first race, something happens, and the second race, something happens again.
Yeah.
And then they start to they start to change the mood, and they start kicking the factory. They start to so I've always been a bit skeptical, but last winter I was flying back to Australia with one of Valentino's mechanics, Alex Briggs, which lives in 15 minutes away from here. And he told me, I asked him, how have you seen this precision testing? And he told me, well, apparently Aprilia is back in the game. So, which was, whoa, okay. So if this guy says so, I have to believe, because he's not part of the equation. You know, always the riders. I mean, if you ask Aleix, he will say something, but he has some interest on that. Yeah. So apparently Aprilia is back, but let's see the reliability of this bike, which is the main question mark.
Definitely. It's a great setup they've got Aprilia now, Randy, with Aleix. We know he's a great rider, Aleix, a great development rider, but they've got a good management team there with Massimo Rivola, who's come over from the Ferrari Formula One operation, which we know is a very high pressure, high stress.
And a very good friend of Randy.
Yes.
So yeah, it's everything now seems to be in place for Aprilia. They are now like a really, I don't want to say a proper team because that sounds a bit harsh, but for the past few years they have sort of, you had Romano sort of, pulling double duties with technical side, but they now seem like they've got a really proper entity now, and that's really encouraging to see that a manufacturer can come to MotoGP regardless of budget or whatever, and have a good operation there.
Yeah, definitely. I think we talked about fitness and what the riders have to be. I think that there's probably no other rider out there as fit as what Aleix Espargaro is, because he lives on his bicycle like Cal Crutchlow. They push themselves through and through to be physically fit. And there were times last year that we saw the Aprilia racing amongst bikes that were definitely much easier to ride and much faster. But my son, Dakota, works for Cal. Cal also has a factory, Honda. And there were a lot of statements when they came back here, the Aprilia is so fast. The Aprilia is so fast. So if Aleix is saying that it is fast, and if there's an issue with it, then there's an issue with all the other riders, because there was a lot of riders saying that Aprilia, I couldn't pass it. And there's no way I couldn't catch it. So, and we know how fast the Honda was last year, their new engine, and so on. So let's hope that works, because Aleix himself has shown some really, really promising races. Maybe not as much as 2018 versus 2019, because 2019, again, each year is so competitive with technical situations and so on and so forth. And it's a very heavy situation when you are a two-bike team, and that's all that's out there to be able to rely on, when there's other bikes. Ducati's got 6 to rely on out there for setups and things like that. So they've really done something magical. And I think Max Rivola, who came from Ferrari with the management side of things, took some pressure off of Romagnoli to let them go and do the engine, let him go do all the technical things, and let's sort out the riders, let's get their heads in line and so on. And Formula One is a completely different aspect of things, but the professional side of things, the garage side of things, the mandatory, what's going to happen to make things work, looks like it's going their way. So let's just let's hope that there's another bike that's going to be in the top 6 amongst that with the factory bikes. And they've got to be KTM, because KTM made them look bad last year.
Yeah. And
KTM's got to pick up where they left off, and who's it got to be, either Suzuki or Yamaha, because it's Honda who's been at the reins of this championship for the last few years, along with Ducati.
You mentioned there Cal Crutchlow. We'll just touch on him briefly because he has been linked to an Aprilia seat for next year. I spoke to him yesterday. There was a media debrief with him, and he said, "Yeah, the Aprilia project, it's exciting. You know, I'd be interested in it if the option's there." That would be a really, really good signing for Aprilia, I think. But looking at the work Cal's did in the Honda, you know, he's a race winner. You know, he'll work well with Aleix because Cal's not really a guy to sort of. There's no ego with Cal, really. He doesn't have arguments with teammates, and Aleix is much the same. You know, I think it would be a really, really good lineup to have Aleix and Cal on the Aprilia next year. What do you guys think, Randy? We'll start with you.
Exactly what you're saying. You know, Cal going there, he has a lot of experience with testing stuff. You know, he had to go through so much in February, at the beginning of the season, because Mark couldn't do it with his shoulder. And Alex was obviously a rookie. And so, and also Nakagami was kind of injured as well, coming back from a surgery. So when you look at all that situation, yes. And like Pedrosa, leaving at a high-end team for all those years, Cal riding an HRC bike, all those years, this is what Honda's done. This is what's happening, and so on. And this is what gets taken over to those other factories when a factory hires those people. Both of those riders would get along very, very well because they both cycle their tails off. So cycling's in their heads. But I think Cal's in a stage of his life as well who can put that special input in, maybe not so much through the whole season in terms of when you go for racing, as you might think that a younger rider should be able to do easier. But I think that those inputs of development, like Pedrosa's got, would definitely help Aprilia out. And the name brand wouldn't be too shabby for them as well.
I would love to see them racing on a racetrack with a bike and in a bicycle as well, because they are probably both of the most good bikers on the grid. So, and seriously, I would say that I fully agree with Randy, and I think that maybe Aleix, I would say I don't want to say needs, but I think it would be good for him having this kind of teammate. Yeah. With I mean this aggressive kind of rider, looking for trying to get the most of the bike, being there, being sharp. So I think it can have a really good effect on Aleix and by extension to the whole package.
For sure. I 100% agree with that. We're just about out of time, but quickly, guys, I know it's, we've not seen any racing, but, it's fun to make a prediction. So who do we think is going to be 2020 world champion? Surely the world champion of MotoGP's most interesting season. Yuri, we'll start with you. One name. Who do you think?
Well, one name. It's very, I think if always it's hard to predict these kind of things at the beginning of the championship, this year even more, because we have less races and I don't know, to be honest. I would say maybe if I have to play the game, I would say that probably Mark, but just because he's won so many championships last years. But other than that, I think this championship is more open than anyone else in the past.
Randy, what about you?
Listen, you can't take anything away from 93, whether you like him or you don't, as a character, off the racetrack, fans, and so on and so forth. But as a professional, as myself, looking at Mark, he's got the factor of the championships that he's won, that ball rolling in the forward position. He's got everything that he wants, including the doorbell to ring when he needs something from Honda, and they're right on top of it because Honda wants to win. But like Oriol says, that I think that this is a very competitive year. There's a lot of factors that go into winning races, and some of those factors are pressure. The pressure from who's underneath. You saw that Mark has taken so many risks when it comes down to winning those races right at the last laps and so on. Is that going to happen at the beginning of the year? Is that going to cause 0 points? to happen at some of those races. Those are the factors that can be levitated very, very quickly under these situations, and who handles that the best. The great thing for this season, the great thing for this championship is the back-to-back races, as well as the back-to-back-to-back races, 3 in a row, after the next one, with a couple of Austrian Grand Prix after the Bruno. It's going to be something very, very special to follow and see. I look forward to coming back and working with you guys if I can. I will be doing some things with Dorna for MotoGP.com for me. So I'll still be very, very much involved with Monster Energy and so on, doing stuff from home with our guests. So I look forward to this championship. I wish all the riders the best from all three. We've only talked about MotoGP, but all three classes. I was able to be at Qatar and watch the first two, Moto3 and Moto2, and they didn't let anybody down for putting on a great show.
Quite right. I agree with both of you, by the way. I think Marquez, for this sprint championship, I think Marquez, Mark's the guy. But let's wait and see. It's going to be a very, very intriguing season, a season like no other. Randy, thank you very much for your company. Thank you for joining us. Yuri, as ever, thank you for your company, and thank you to the viewers on this occasion for your company. Make sure you stay tuned to Autosport or motorsport.com this season for all the MotoGP action, because we're going to be busy as anything, bringing you the best coverage we can. But until then, it's a very warm goodbye.